A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Many of the men and women who serve Australia in the military find themselves feeling left out in the cold once they retire. Some also suffer PTSD. Some have been physically, mentally and emotionally damaged whilst deployed overseas. We're joined today by Fiona McMillan. She's an ex-serving officer in the Australian Army Reserves, and she also appeared before the Royal Commission to discuss suicide among Australian veterans. And I want to welcome you, Fiona, to 2020 today.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's a pleasure and an honour to be here. It truly is.
Fiona, as an ex-serving officer in the Australian Army Reserves, this is obviously something which is very dear to your heart and very close to home, and that is the welfare of our veterans.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, we celebrate, if I could use the word celebrate, we remember our veterans via Anzac Day, and we remember, obviously, on Remembrance Day. So the poppies and the rosemary have to mean something, but what's not brought out on those days is the fact that many a veteran is so ill. They're so ill that they can't attend a parade. They won't even go there because to them it's like a mass funeral, if I could be so blunt as to say that.
Yeah, it relives trauma and brings back memories that some of them don't want to remember. So why did you appear before the Royal Commission? Were you asked to appear, or you approached the Royal Commission and said, I want to make a statement?
The latter. I wanted to make a statement.
Yeah, and that was based upon what you'd observed. Tell me what you'd observed.
Well, my situation is not unusual, but when I describe it, it'll probably sound very unusual. I joined up in the early 90s. I enlisted in the early 90s and got out, but I had no support. I actually chose to discharge myself, and people go, oh, shock, horror, what did she do that for? Circumstances I probably won't go into on air because there was an investigation, but basically I tossed in a military career. And I thought nothing of it. I mean, my dad was horrified because he was the one that sort of asked me, have you thought about joining in defence? And I said, no, Dad. And he said, well, they're recruiting for officers, on page 29 of the Courier Mail. So this is when I was like 27. So when I got out, I was an absolute mess, and I had no help at all, and I just bumbled through civilian jobs. And I look back and I think I probably had some form of PTSD. For those of you who don't know what that means, it's post-traumatic stress disorder. And I actually have a service dog who's a beautiful border collie. And so when I looked back at those years, I thought, no, there wasn't enough help, or virtually no help. And then I was diagnosed about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was in complete denial. And when I went through the system of rehabilitation through DVA, I was sort of horrified at what had happened, and I was horrified as a former officer, and I don't mean to pull rank in saying that, but it's like I had a leadership role, and I just felt that this is not good enough. And these people are so ill, the veterans are so ill that they can't defend themselves. So to me, it was like there were two forms of battle. One is actually on the battlefield, which everybody understands, but the second battle is coming through this bureaucratic nightmare of a system and being constantly rejected for medical claims. So that was why I chose to stand before the Royal Commission, because I thought I'm one of them here, and I'm not the only one that's gone through this botched bureaucratic system that, like an insurance, aim to virtually minimise the payouts. And I just thought this is atrocious treatment towards people who've served Australia.
Yeah, so is there a feeling amongst the veterans community in Australia that Veterans Affairs is not doing enough to help them?
For sure. And the other question mark is over the RSL clubs. So I've sort of approached it on 2 levels, 2 prongs, and I actually approached RSL Queensland since we reside in Queensland, and if I'm allowed to read to you what they said, it's only 2 paragraphs, Andrew, of the structure of the RSL.
Yeah, go for it. What does it say?
Well, I had a situation where I went to a particular RSL club and I was with a civilian person, and in my ignorance, I just thought, I'll pull out my white card or my gold card. I actually have a white card, and I've also got a lifetime subscription card. And a lot of veterans have those because when you go through the claims process with your advocate, that's what helps you get your medical help. So I went in there and, this is a typical thing where I was denied that I was even a veteran. So I was sort of made to feel like, I'm thinking this is an RSL club, and I was just incensed by that. And the civilian lady I was with was also horrified. And I thought, I was just started to get so upset that I couldn't even order lunch and have any acknowledgement that I was a true veteran. And I thought, no. So I approached RSL Queensland and I thought, put your money where your mouth is.
Well, hang on, let's stop there, Fiona. So you're saying you tried to enter an RSL club, you flashed your service card and they said what, it was a fake or they'd never seen one before? What was their response?
It's the way the structure is that it's horrifying that, to me, a veteran ought to be able to walk into an RSL club anywhere across Australia and be acknowledged as a veteran because that's what RSL stands for. It's Returns and Servicemen's Leagues Club. So you would think that by the logo that that's what it's for. But I am here to share with you that the response I got back from RSL Queensland, it was a board member and he had to research this himself because he didn't actually know, which is even more astounding. So there are two wings. So the first one is RSL Queensland. And the second one is what they call RSL clubs. So he's saying to me, RSL Queensland, the RSL comprising sub-branches, districts and RSL Queensland exists to provide wellbeing and welfare assistance to the defence community. And then he says the sub-branches and districts are separate entities from RSL Queensland, but through the RSL Queensland Constitution, in brackets and constitutions of the sub-branches and districts, RSL Queensland can influence and prescribe the activities of both the sub-branches and the districts. So the second layer, he's just said, and I'll finish up with this, RSL clubs. So he's saying in Queensland, RSL clubs are commercial entities and not owned or operated by RSL Queensland. RSL clubs are licensed entertainment venues which may or may not direct some of their proceeds back to local RSL sub-branches.
There you go. So they've really ceased to, the average local RSL branch has really ceased to be there for the benefit of the return service personnel. It's really just another club, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, I've got a finance background, Andrew, so I actually submitted some documentation to one of the politicians and I dug it out. I think the Lord must have led me to it. But with my degree, I've got majors in management and accounting and I looked into club management. So this is separate from RSL. But if you're wanting to do a club management degree, the focus is now on, machine gaming and all these other things. And I had a lot of credits. So I'm thinking, why on earth are we even having poker machines and like alcohol, if you want to go that far, because they are not the things that veterans need to rehabilitate. And I think that's being looked into by other RSLs across Australia.
Yeah, but they're also cash cows, aren't they? Like every sporting club these days almost needs pokies and definitely alcohol sales just to keep afloat. But let's move on to the Royal Commission that you appeared at. What were the findings of that Royal Commission?
They have been released, I think it's 7 volumes. And when I say 7 volumes, they're not, encyclopedia size. They're small volumes, but that is on the website and I can't bring myself to look at some of them, but they did say that DVA had failed to help veterans in a professional and adequate manner. And amongst other things, I have to agree with that. The other findings were to do with release of information like privacy, and I'm sure people have seen in the media various veterans have been crucified by various TV stations. I won't mention the names, but it's a horrible existence where we've got veterans that are coming out and trying to start their life over again, but they're being dragged through this muck and taking their own lives as a result.
Yeah, I know what you're referring to, and I'll say what it is. It's the ABC. I think they've been sued by a former service member for, I think it was for vilification or for slander or just, spreading false information about the poor guy. But like you said, there seems to be a real feel on the left side of either politics or media or just society at large that is sort of anti-war, and that gets convoluted into anyone that's served in the military that's been involved in an overseas deployment.
Exactly. And I'm here to tell you that most people, when they think of Army, they do think of deployments, but the ratio is about 6 to 1. So I'm saying for every one soldier that you might see that has been deployed, there are about 6 other soldiers that are backing that up. So say through transport, uniforms, logistics, ordnance, signals. So there's a lot that backs that up. So most of the general public may not be aware that it's an enormous defence force, and it is a force. So you're not seeing most of the Army. You're not seeing most of that. So we've got Army, Navy and Air Force. So Army is gruelling. There's no two ways about it. It's absolutely gruelling. I mean, I go to physio twice a week and I'm one of the lucky ones. I don't have any injuries from like the neck down. And he said most of his clients are ex-Army or Army Reserve. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and so you can't even bring yourself, though, to read some of these findings, but it is a little bit simplistic, isn't it, when people vent on service personnel, because at the end of the day, the government is the one who decides if our military are deployed overseas. It's not the individual servicemen or women, is it? They're just doing what they're told. And let's put it out there, they're doing what they're told at the risk of their own lives, at the risk of their own safety. They know the risks, and they really should be celebrated for having the courage to actually stand up and put their lives at risk for the sake of Australia, shouldn't they?
Exactly. I mean, and the thing is that at the recruitment stage, when someone tries to join the ADF in whatever capacity, not everyone's going to get through. So those that make it through are the best of the best of the best. You know, it's a grueling process. You have to pass a psych test, aptitude test. I mean, I went through what they call a DEO process, so that's direct entry officer. So I had a qualification. So some people might have, you know, could be medical, could be engineering, could be whatever. You might have a civilian qualification, but that's just the first step. So people sort of think, oh, you know, because you've got a degree and whatever, you could join. No. That's your first base. It doesn't work like that to enlist in defence. So you're most likely to get in as an officer with that qualification, and you'll be put through the paces to join that particular unit because it's a specialised service. But there are no guarantees during that whole process that you're going to make it through the other side. So it is grueling. You have to learn all the drill. I mean, I was a platoon commander when I left the Army Reserve, and, you know, there are certain jurisdictions and roles that go with your rank. So I went straight in as a lieutenant, which is what they call a junior officer. So I'm not sure if your listeners are familiar with the ranking structure, but there are two lines of that. So the first is what they call non-commissioned officers, so the NCOs, and we're using acronyms all the time to like shorthand our speech. And the other ones are the commissioned officers, which is what I was, and that gets signed off by the Governor-General and the Minister for Defence. So, yeah, you've got those two lines, and it's very cut and dried.
And like you said, and people pay a huge price to get into the military and to serve in the military. And it's sad, isn't it, that in modern Australia that there's a feeling amongst that community that Veteran Affairs is not doing enough to really support them. But I want to thank you, Fiona McMillan, for standing up and letting your voice be heard and appearing before that Royal Commission. Obviously, it wasn't easy for you to do that, but you did it and you've stepped up and you continue to step up. And I also want to thank you for coming on 2020 today and sharing a little bit of your story and also a little bit about this Royal Commission and the findings that came as a result of it.
Thank you. It's a case of watch this space in the media as it rolls out.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.